you don't spend that much time to try to think about the engine in your car. You're also thinking about everything around, if it's comfortable, consumption and so on. And I think for virtualization platform, it's the same.
Hello and welcome to episode 78 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name's Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode, we're talking to a company that specializes in open source virtualization solutions. They offer an integrated virtualization platform built on the Xen hypervisor and a management and backup platform, Xen Orchestra. Their solutions are positioned as an alternative to the major hypervisors, providing a comprehensive stack for organizations. That company is Vates, the creators of XCP-ng and Xen Orchestra. Joining me today is Olivier Lambert, CEO and co-founder at Vates. Welcome to the show.
Hi, and thank you for hosting me.
Excellent. So this is couldn't be better timed, Olivier, in terms of what's happening today in the land of hypervisors and virtualization. And I'm really excited to dig into what Vates are doing to, basically enter us into a brand new world of the hypervisor as we enter 2024. But before we get into that, if you love great things with great tech and would like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link on the show notes or head to gtwgt.com and also go to YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button. All of our past episodes are on there. Also, go to Spotify podcasts. That's where we're hosted, and all the podcasts, your Apple, your Google, your Spotify. Hit the like, hit the follow, and you will get all future episodes. So with that out of the way, Olivier, let's talk about yourself first. Let's talk about the lead up to the founding of Vates. But I'm interested in yourself. You've got quite a cool story. I'm out of France, but maybe give a bit of background about you and where you've come from a technology point of view in your career.
Sure. So I'm Oliver, as Anthony said, and indeed, the background and the story before creating Vates is, I think, quite interesting, especially in the light of the recent event in the virtualization world. So I'm myself a former system administrator. I worked for a pretty large company before creating my own, and I was, it was, let's say, back in the 2000, and virtualization was pretty early back then, and we started to deploy Xen as an open source virtualization hypervisor, and that's where I started to do things with that. And at some point, I realized that I'd love to do open source as my main driver every day. So that's why I decided with two other co-founder to create a new adventure that wasn't really specific into the virtualization or whatnot. It was, integrating open source to start with our, let's say, local customers. We are based in Grenoble, so in the Alps in France.
Nice.
And so the business started like this, like not a software editor like we are today, but integrator of any open source solution you can imagine, database, things like this and whatnot. And then for our own requirements, because we started to have many customers, we wanted to, have also a virtualization solution for our own machines that we had in a colo, and we wanted to manage those machines. And at the time, we were using the Citrix Xen server project, and the API of the virtualization platform is great, but you only had one Windows UI. And as you can imagine, at Vates, we are originally more, Linux server guys.
Yes.
So using, a heavy client to manage our VM wasn't really something we love to. So we decided to create an orchestrator on top of Citrix Xen server, and we started Xen Orchestra. And that's how we switched from, being an integrator to a software editor. And we started with one first software that was just, I would say, the orchestrator thing. But, as it is open source, what's funny with open source is when you start something, you talk a bit about it around you, and suddenly there's people interested. So a lot of people said, okay, I'd like to use your software, your web UI to manage Xen server. And that's pretty much how the community was created, kind almost out of thin air, with many other people interested about the projects. And then those people asked us to modify the software in a way they wanted to use it. It's funny because, we created it as something like I don't know, very basic management tool, and it transformed into a backup orchestration, load balancer, whatever,
Wow, yeah.
whatnot you can imagine. So, the story wasn't straightforward at all. We, have a first life with the company, then a second life, and then a third one, because we come to the XCP-ng
Yeah.
project, which was in fact a fork of the Citrix Xen server platform. So a fork in open source is you just get the code because you disagree with the way the project is done. Citrix doesn't have a great track record with open source in general. So that's why we decided to take that our own project. And for that, we made a Kickstarter campaign.
Okay.
Because also, yeah, the funny story about it is when we decided to make the fork, we are in 2018. And, virtualization in 2018 is already not sexy. Everyone is talking, public cloud,
It was
containers,
done.
and so on.
Yeah, it was done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's dead. Nobody needs any kind of virtualization technology and so on, which is even more, remarkable now today with what's happening with VMware. But
Mm.
then I was myself kind of self-convinced that indeed maybe virtualization was dead. So we said, why not? Let's create a Kickstarter and see if people are interested in a fully open source and easy to use virtualization platform in 2018. And to my own surprise, we got the target in less than 24 hours. And then I realized, okay,
Wow.
so there's a difference between what you can hear during talks and conferences about we are Netflix, we are doing this, we are doing that, we are Google, we are doing this and doing that, and the reality on what's going on into any companies, regular companies, having to still to deal with their existing virtualization software, existing software, and things like that. So it was kind of a realization that people need something at some point to run their software. The cloud is very good for many different use cases, but for something that's kind of stable, that doesn't require elasticity and things like this, it might be expensive. So we did that, where I think we could say it was maybe the worst moment to create a new virtualization platform, because nobody
Yeah.
cared about it. And so anyway, we did it because we found people interested into that. And almost by accident, I would say, because we forked the Citrix platform, we managed to get the whole stack. We got the orchestration and backup platform that we did earlier, Xen
Yep.
Orchestra, and now we got the virtualization platform. And then we said, okay, so now we got a whole stack, so we will try to move forward from there and provide this as a, let's say, complete solution. And then, something happened with VMware and changed almost everything for us.
Everything. Yeah. That's a lot to unpack there. I've got a ton of questions about number one, when you say you were a system administrator or integrator, you used like an IT guy to start with, like how did that start? Were you just literally working on the early days in the early 2000s on those early virtualization platforms? And obviously, you had ESX, Xen was around, but then
Yeah.
the orchestration that was around that, I think back to those days when I was testing out those platforms, when the emergence of stuff like VMware Cloud Director came out, vCloud Director, but also CloudStack, OpenStack, OpenNebula. All of these orchestration platforms that sat on top of the hypervisor was where it was at. So I'm pretty sure along the way I must have tested Xen Orchestra as well. So it's quite interesting that you jumped from just doing that to being able to actually create an orchestration platform. I'm interested in that jump. Did you
Yeah.
do that
It's
yourself, or
very
did you, did you
simple.
did you find people that did it for you? I mean, what was the sort of from A to B? How did you get there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, as I would say, it's a usual story where in Zen at the time, there was nothing, no, GUI for it. I mean, I played Zen back in, I don't know, 2005, something like this. No orchestration platform existed at all. So you had to deal with configuration file,
Yes.
command lines, and so on. And I was frustrated by the fact that I started to have many machines and I couldn't tell where my VMs were, basically on which physical machine. And that frustration made me create something, an early prototype in PHP back then, to
Right.
say, okay, I will find a way to, have a web server asking, it was not really an API, but something like this in Python, if I remember
Yeah.
back then, and at least to display, where my goddamn VMs are, because when I'm shutting something, I want to know it without to connect to any
Right.
machine to type, list my VM and so on. So
So this
I
was
was my
you.
first.
You were
Yeah,
writing.
it's
You were
me.
writing it.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Okay.
I
That's
I, I
that.
was. I would. Yeah, I'm not a great developer, but
Good
I
enough.
always
Clearly
been.
good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested in the web technologies from, I would say, the start of the web. I'm
Yeah.
kind of born with the web. I mean, using something in a web browser is, the basic thing to me. So when I wanted to have orchestration, the browser was, the normal way to follow. And obviously, very soon, my code was really bad, and I asked a friend, my future associate, by the way, to help me to do it well, to use, a Git version control and so on. And in fact, the what's even more surprising is Xen Orchestra existed before we created the company, like as a summer project I did for, outside my work, since
That's
I wanted
cool.
to do something for that. So it was a side project, and when we created the company, it was not even a topic. It was something I made years ago, and I kind of resurrected it, let's say 5 years after, because I realized no other project was there. I searched, I said maybe someone did something like I did, and
Yeah.
it wasn't the case. And the blog I created 5 years ago continued to had, I don't know, 1 or 2,000 visitors per month. And then I realized, okay, there's a need for that. CloudStack and OpenStack were, let's say, the big guns, because they're the large orchestrator at the
Yes.
data center level, and they are pretty complex. If you have few hundreds VM or less, the cost to deploy them and to maintain them back in the time was really huge. So I wanted to make something for people like me with, I don't know, few dozens of physical machines and
Yeah.
something to manage their Xen infrastructure.
So
And that's
this is about
how, yeah,
2010. About 2010
yes,
was the time when you resurrected it and brought, because I that's
yeah,
definitely when I
exactly. It
started
was
working around that.
20, yeah, 2012, just after 1 year after creating the company, I decided to resurrect the project that I created around 2009, 2010. So it was 2009. And so yes,
Yeah.
and then that's where I decided to be an interface not for plain Zen, but Zen embedded into Zen Server, the virtualization
Get you.
platform. And the reason why was they use in Zen Server something really great they made called the Zen APIs, ZAPI, because when Citrix purchased Zen, back in 2007, the Citrix customer are Windows shops mainly, and they have
Yes.
no knowledge on Linux. So they have to create this Windows heavy client connecting to the Zen server and
I
without having
remember
any
it.
Linux
Yeah.
knowledge,
Very and very clunky as well for memory. Like not a very intuitive piece of software. It was not easy. I mean, I remember evaluating different hypervisors back in that time frame, and Zen was like, I installed it and just went, no way, I'm not touching this, compared to what was already there with even virtual server, and then starting into ESX, and then what Hyper-V was doing as well. It was just
you
it was always a port to me. Zen was always
yeah.
like a poor cousin, if you know what I
You are
mean.
pinpointing exactly the issue, and I think one of the things explaining our success is with Xen Orchestra, we succeed because we made something easy to use, despite being open source, I would say, because it's not just a reputation, it's I would say almost a common thing that many open source projects are working sometimes really well, but they are really hard to use and
Yes.
maintain. And so we wanted to make something a bit easier to use. It's far from perfect, but compared to what we had before, it's a tremendous improvement. And that's why people started to adopt the product. And again, it was first on top of Zen server. And so our customers was in fact Citrix customers. So that's how we started to do things with a fully open source business with just, you pay a monthly fee or yearly fee to have support. And that's a pretty simple one. It was even at the time flat price. So even
Yep.
big customers with hundreds of machines could just take one Xen Orchestra subscription, and it worked well. So that's how we really, shape the company. That's how I think our first pivot, that's becoming a company with only 3% to almost, let's say, 10 people before we created then the virtualization platform.
So yeah, so I mean, the value proposition of the company was effectively, like you said, to make something a little bit more simpler that was actually quite complex, and through just your own drive, your own innovation, you're able to tinker a little bit. You mentioned the side project, That's a great story, right? So
Yeah.
was the company always called what it was called? Like was it always Vates
Yeah, it's
or
it's it's Vates, and that's because that's a kind of a small wink, because in Latin, Vates mean oracle. So it was
ah
like as oracle is often seen as sometimes a bad company for some reasons,
yes,
especially for commercial reasons. It was a way to say we want to become something big, but the right way.
I
So
love that.
we are named different. That's why Vates is kind of someone able to see the future in Latin.
Cool.
So
So
that's the
it
origin of the
means
name.
something. Which is cool because I think of
Exactly. There's a
some
story.
companies are named and they just named because it's short and it's snappy and it's supposed to do well. But I love it when there's actually a story and a reason
Yeah,
behind the
there's a
name.
pun.
That's it. So talk about the decision to you're doing services. You've got the orchestra. The orchestra that's doing it. That's finding its way in the community. You obviously leverage the community to build that up, and
Oh yeah.
I guess in doing that, that then allowed you as a distribution model to be able to go and kickstart the hypervisor, right? Like I think
Yeah.
so. It's actually quite smart. I love talking. There's the seven powers of business and network effects and distribution is a big one. So you use the community as a distribution to be able to get the
Yeah.
network effect to be able to crowdsource with the Kickstarter. So how did the decision to kickstart that come about, and what did it entail, and what was the amount that you were put it up for out of interest?
Okay. So basically, you are completely correct. We managed to succeed by forking the project because we had a community behind our back that's trusted us for years, because we are doing, I would say, real open source in a way that it's fully open source, not open core. And we always shared everything, every feature for people
Oh,
who want to
nice.
play with their home lab. And, this trust we spent years to build was really helpful to bootstrap the hypervisor project, the XCP-ng project. And the initial goal was, and I would say even the initial idea was to say, okay, we'll have a very small target that will help us to explore if it's possible already. So it was like something 10K euros, something like this, and said, this is the minimal gap that
Okay.
we want to achieve. It was like, I wasn't sure about the interest about it. So let's see, because if people are paying, and you had just t-shirts and mugs, and a promise that we will do it, but no actual support or whatever. It was really, if you believe in us, just, send us money, and to us, that's the ultimate proof that you will be interested.
Yeah.
It's like, instead of just studying the market, you tell people, if you're interested, go ahead, and, we'll deliver. And
There's
they
a leap
did.
of faith.
And
A leap of
yeah,
faith, right? Yeah.
exactly. And it was a leap of faith also on our end. We said maybe we will never reach the target, maybe nobody care, and maybe we'd have done something else. I don't know. But then in front of the success, then we realize the importance of building a full stack virtualization platform that is completely open, with also, us listening to what people are telling, because this community trusts us because we are open source, but also because we added features they wanted. They wanted backup, we added backup. They wanted self-service features, we added that, and so on. And we always did like this. I'm still, spending, I would say, 1/3 of my time on the community forum to listen to that
That's great.
feedback.
Yeah.
And I
And that's
think that's
important.
really important. Yes, that's really a key differentiator, because when you listen to a user, sure, your solution will never be perfect. It will never be 100% of VMware for many reasons. We are not a
Yeah.
multi-billion company, but the fact that you listen to people, get their feedback, and build a product with them, make them, kind of hook into the product, and they want you to succeed, not just being a customer. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of our key differentiator in the end, is being open, the true way for both the code, but also the way to listen to people.
That's very good. And I think before we get into the current state of where we're at with Broadcom and VMware, I do want to get an understanding of XCP-ng and understand
Mhm.
the differentiators and obviously the fork that you did, but what makes it so compelling today as a platform? You mentioned the
Yeah.
backup, you mentioned the self-service, which is cool because the biggest thing, like not a lot of backup companies support Xen out of the box, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to build that into the product is great.
Mhm.
Self-service is something that VMware obviously did quite well with VMware Cloud Director. Then you've got the Open Nebulas of the world and all the
Mm.
control panels that sat on top of that. So they had something, but that was all piecemeal, right? So to have
Yeah.
something completely built in from the start sounds like it's pretty compelling. So just spend a couple of minutes talking about what is so compelling about XCP-ng.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's many differentiators, especially if you compare with VMware. Again, on the technical level, it's pretty clear that nobody on the market got 100%. But as you know, time passed with VMware, we had many customers complaining that they have to buy features they don't care about, but they have to pay for it. So
Yep.
I would say on our side, let's start with the fact that we are open source. I just said that, but I think it's important in a way that XCP-ng is now part of the Linux Foundation since the last 2 or 3 years. So it means everything we do is not locked to us. Obviously, our main, I would say, value is we develop the solution, but we are not selling a license to use it. We are selling support. We are
Yes.
selling, advice and how to set up. That's also a bit different than big vendors with local integrators. So sure, we have some local integrators, but you can talk directly to the editor and discuss your project, what would be the best hardware, what would be the best approach, helping you to build a POC without signing any contract or thing like this. Really building a relationship. So outside the product, it's already the way we make a relationship with our users and customers. For the project itself, I would say the main driver for our VMware users migrating to our platform is it's not far from it in terms of components. I mean, we are true type 1 hypervisor, like Xen ESXi could be compared somehow.
Yep.
We got a platform that you could compare. We got the equivalent of vCenter with Xen Orchestra. So it's like,
Yes.
sure, it's different, but in a way, you can compare the components in a way that's pretty similar. You have a central management console with Xen Orchestra, which is also doing backups, virtual machine backups,
Mhm.
without any agent and so on. And so we found that people migrating from VMware weren't really lost because they don't have to learn Linux commands or things like this. So
Yeah.
again, we back to what made our success first with Xen Orchestra is, sure, we are open source, but doesn't mean you have to get a huge bird and only able to type very long Linux commands or to be a Linux expert. It's meant to be turnkey basically, and that's a real differentiator against other open source solution where maybe you have to learn. Obviously you have to learn how to use a tool, but
Yes.
the level of the depth on things you have to learn, we try to make it easier with the UI. We've got an API, CLI, and so on. But
Mhm.
anyway, to have a look and feel that is closer to the usual product on the market than the niche, solution that requires, tape and whatever to make it work. So I think that's one compelling thing. In fact, our user doesn't they don't care about the fact we run Xen and whatnot. They want a platform that just works. And that's, they install the ISO, next, it's installed, I can boot my VMs, and that's it.
That's
And
quite
that's
interesting.
really compelling. Yeah.
I think you make a good point there. Like being able to abstract the hypervisor and make it irrelevant is very important.
Oh, yes.
Especially in today's day and age. And years obviously you understand that for years there was these hypervisor wars, right? Like it
Hmm.
was always Hyper-V versus VMware, and then Nutanix came in and caused a stir, and
Hmm.
they were the big three, and it was very religious in a way,
Yeah.
right? But ultimately, we're talking about something that it can be democratized as well. It should be an underlying feature you never really have to worry about. But somehow, VMware were able to create enough of a market and a condition in that market where the hypervisor that they produced was seen to be the best by a mile
Yeah.
in terms of features,
Yeah.
functionalities, ease of use. Whether that was true or not, that's the perception. And through that, look, it's a great product. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I built my
Oh,
career
yeah.
on it. Like,
It's
lots of
we
people, lots
all
of
agree
people.
on that.
That's exactly right. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that it was horrible, but I'm not going to also, by the same token, sit here and say that it was perfect, because the amount of support cases that I had during my time as owning a platform that was based on the hypervisor, yeah, it was a nightmare. And to be fair, even when Hyper-V, there was just problems all the time. But I think that's the nature of the game, right? That was the nature of
Yeah.
what it was. It was always some sort of issue because it's a very complex sort of platform when you're taking networking, storage,
Oh, yes.
applications that use there's all sorts of variables that come into play here, and that's
Mm.
difficult. So it's never an environment where you're going to get absolute perfection, but somehow the mentality that got brought out there was that VMware was perfection, and they basically owned a monopoly at the enterprise level for that. So they were
Mm.
seen as the enterprise play, and if you're an enterprise, you had to have VMware, and that was it. End of story. As you went
Yeah.
down and you started to go into the SME, SMB, this is where alternative hypervisors came to play, and that's where Hyper-V was there, Nutanix played in it. And I always thought that, KVM and Xen were there, but I also thought that the KVMs of the world, the OpenStacks of the world, they were there for telcos and that sort of
Yeah,
service provider
exactly.
land. So
Mhm.
they filled that niche. So in terms of your niche for your product, I mean, where did it take hold and where is
Yeah.
it sort of sitting at the moment?
I think it's again, you're right, and I think today the value of a product is the entire solution. First, it's not just the hypervisor. I mean, you don't spend that much time to try to think about the engine in your car. You're also thinking about everything around, if it's comfortable, consumption and so on. And I think for virtualization platform, it's the same. We manage all of our KVMs and VMware and so on to have a pretty decent base, operation in virtualization. There's a lot of work regarding security, compatibility, and so on, but still it works pretty well. So now what matters for the end user and the target we have mostly is as you said, could be for small to medium infrastructure where, for example, we are not targeting to be used as a tool stack inside the public cloud. It makes sense if you want to go public cloud size, as you said, OpenStack, CloudStack, and so on. But if you have something like from, I don't know, 3 to few hundreds machines,
Hmm.
then that makes sense. And for example, where it makes also a lot of sense is in the private cloud area where you don't want maybe to still have things on prem. You want to rent your servers because you don't want to purchase them
Yep.
anymore. But cloud is too expensive, so the good fit is to use a private cloud and you rent the solution for, I don't know, VH or whatever provider. For VMware, I think it was a great strength to have those deals with many hosting providers
Yeah.
and said,
I was
we
one
give
of them,
you
right?
monthly
That's
fee.
that's that's what I
Yeah,
did. That was my day job for 10 years of my career.
exactly.
Mm.
And that's perfectly, I mean, outside the on-prem thing that still exists and will continue to exist for years for people, like I said, from 3 to few hundreds hosts. Then the, managed private cloud area is where we could shine because it's, in the end, relatively close to the on-prem stuff. And it's
Yes.
the area between, again, 3 and 50, 100, 200, 300. Obviously, there's outliers. We have users with one machine, and we have very large users like Kayak from kayak.com with, I don't know, maybe 2,000 machines
There
running
you go.
XCP-ng.
That's
Yeah,
sizable.
but they are not using it the same way than the average Joe. They are kind of using all through Terraform and
Yes,
Packer
yes,
and
yes, yes.
API and so on. They basically throw a physical machine like we do for a VM. So it's another level, it's another scale, but it works too. So, but the core of the target we have is, I would say, people still having an infrastructure on-prem or, having a third-party colo or hosting provider. Now having trouble with VMware pricing, obviously,
Yes.
and then those people are seeking for alternative that won't make it too different from people coming from VMware because you don't want just to let them, okay, so you have a root access on this Linux and go ahead, create, KVM machines with the command line. That won't be obviously something that people would like to do.
No.
So that's why we are kind of in the middle ground by, sure, we are open source, but we don't want to be, too complicated to manage. So it's a kind of best of both worlds. At least that's where we are going and where I think build our success. That's the main reason.
Yeah, and look, it's definitely VMware's dominance over the last 15 years or so. It's been really since the early mid 2000s. It's been significant, and like we talked about earlier, it created a virtual monopoly where there wasn't really a monopoly, but there was a monopoly in the market,
Yes, de facto.
yeah, de facto standard. That's it, right? And it's just the way it
Yeah,
is. We talked
exactly.
about this, and they did it very smartly. And I think what's happened now is that people have to start to think about the hypervisor again all of a sudden, where before there was never a question. Yep, no worries. We run
Yeah,
VMware. Yeah, we're going into the cloud, but for on premises, we're still going to run ESXi. We've got vCenter running. It's reasonable. It's doing its
exactly.
job. We're happy
Mhm.
with there are some problems every time. Sometimes, I wouldn't install the first version as an example, but it's still the best one out there. But now, what's happened with the Broadcom scenario is that it's created a bit of fear and
Yeah.
uncertainty and doubt.
Mhm.
Yes, FUD. It's FUD, right? That's been created, and I think also the FUD has been fueled by other companies offering similar solutions as well. Like I don't think I haven't seen you guys do it very much, but I know that other,
No, that's not
yeah,
the way we work. We
yeah,
never. I mean, I'm happy to tell VMware is a great product, and that's not the problem right now. The
that's it.
problem is the way Broadcom is trying to squeeze it to take transform it into a bigger cash cow, and that's not a product problem. That's a commercial problem, a sales problem, or whatever you name it. That's
That's
not a
it.
technical issue in the end.
No,
Yeah.
that's right. And so to that end, it still has, right? And you don't want to see, I call it ambulance chasing, right? When something like
Yeah.
when something goes down, you chase it. I don't think it's not right to do that. However, what has happened is people need to think about alternatives because all of a sudden, for various reasons, costs being the predominant reason, they
Mhm.
have to look at it. So, I think now it's really interesting that we're entered this era of virtualization where the likes of Parallels, Oracle, Citrix, Hyper-V, Proxmox is getting mentioned.
Mhm.
Red Hat probably maybe prematurely killed RHV.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
that they might be rethinking that one now, right?
Oh yes, it's. I
I mean,
think so.
yeah, I mean, Overt still exists, and I think Oracle sounds like they're going to keep that upstream and keep it going. Um, but I think it's really cool that a lot of these other hypervisors are coming out now as alternatives, and there's choice again. But
Yeah,
to the point, you've been around for, you started the orchestra thing 10, 15 years ago.
yeah.
Your hypervisor is already, 2018 to 2024. We're talking already 5 years of maturity here. It's not
Hmm.
like these things are popping up overnight. So I
Yeah.
think the great thing is the customers have choice, but are they really gonna, when push comes to shove, move across? So how would you go about talking to a customer that might be umming and ahhing because
Okay.
of the
So
cost?
that's yeah. That's a good question. And to be fair, as we are a company made by technical people, I have to admit we are not great salespeople, and that's people coming to us, in fact. And
But you're very
now,
endearing, and I think that's a great positive. Very
yeah,
endearing.
I mean, it's inbound, like we call that. So people are coming to us and said, maybe we have a call, or we've been reached something like one lead per hour coming and said, I'm using VMware. I can't pay the next, time I need to renew, or I need to renew the hardware because the hardware compatibility list is very limited, and
Yes.
my hardware that's only 3 years ago, I have to ditch it. This is not acceptable, and all the things that makes the a problem with VMware. And again, it could be a money problem, it could be a hardware renewal problem, a trust problem, but also I would say a long-term relationship thing that is broken, because they
Yes.
started to remove many things, and people starts to just said, we have some big leads that are coming to us and said, we have hundreds of machines. Obviously we won't change everything just now,
Mm.
but just help us to start mitigating the risk. So the
Yes.
idea is, for a new project or hardware that we maybe wanted to decommission, then we will install your platform. We'll install 1, 2, 3, 4 applications that we run that are maybe not critical, and then more and more and more. And then for
Interesting.
them, it's an insurance on, for the next time we could continue to grow. Our team internally will be trained on the platform, and that's how they make migration. It's step by step. And I think I like this approach, because we're not here to say we'll replace 100% of the VMware feature again. We
Yeah.
said, okay, you could start to mitigate that risk. So that's for the biggest one. And then the smaller one are kind of, start with one machine and it's very fast, and then they make the migration in a few weeks, and that's it. So people that are coming to us, I think, already made the decision in their head to really try something else. So I can tell for those that are still hesitating,
Yeah.
and I'm not telling them that they must, because obviously every case is different. But I think the idea to at least explore and mitigate the risk and learning something else. And as you said, it's in a question of diversity on the market. And diversity is
Diversity
good,
is
because
good.
when there's
Very
no
good.
diversity, there's a monopoly, and the monopoly will lead to the Broadcom situation. So
Yes.
we are
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
all, I would say, guilty of that situation, because maybe we didn't want to think about it. We said, this is done. There's only one player. I don't want to think about it. I will never be fired because I choose VMware.
How good's that?
And yeah,
Great.
that
That's a great
mindset
call to the
helped to
past.
build that. Yeah,
I think you
exactly.
you mentioned something that was interesting just before when you talked about people, for a net new project has old machines run out or as old hardware times out, they might buy a new one, but they might move a workload that's non-critical. It sounds to me very similar to how people approach the move from on-premises to the cloud first. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like
yeah,
that's how they started. Let's put something that's not critical on. Let's start putting small workloads on. Then as we get used to it, as we get used to the
exactly.
solution, as we get trust in the platform, then we'll move
Hmm.
everything across. So
And
this it's
that's a good
actually
way to
interesting.
do it.
Actually
Hmm.
interesting that we're talking about the same methodology that people would have gone to the cloud with, which to be fair is just another hypervisor at times, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think
Hmm.
that's very interesting. So I think to your point, mainly about how people will do it, yes, they will start to realize that things start to age out by attrition, they will then go, okay, let's move one, let's move two. And I think from your point of view, are you gonna be looking to develop tooling that will aid in migration, or obviously you
That's
can leverage
we
other.
started to do that. In
Yeah.
fact, due to the pressure of the acquisition, as soon as it was announced, we started to think about it, and we made a tool right in Xen Orchestra that will connect to your vCenter stuff and list the machine, and then you select the machine, and you could import them on the fly without having a shared storage to
Wow.
put your OVF, blah blah blah. It's just streaming the VM to our platform, and yes, because that's 99% of our new customers are coming from VMware. So this is
Yeah.
kind of our priority and things. Also, which is really interesting, is those users are asking for features sometimes we do not have, but it helps to create the roadmap of tomorrow and said, okay,
Yes.
we need to prioritize that because those users are maybe more demanding than our historical community, the early adopters and so on. But to
Understand.
me, I like it because it's a challenge and I want to get there. I want to get similar features and to grow the product. And the funny thing about it is, sure, we are based in France, but I would say 60 to almost 70% of our revenue is made in the US.
There you go.
So the US is the first place where people started to make the migration and where the growth is the biggest one. And in Europe, we just started to realize the danger as soon as Broadcom made the first announcement regarding changing in pricing and so on. But it was like kind of everyone was crossing fingers in Europe and said, I hope this won't change too much. But when it started, I would say in the last 3 months, it's really crazy because everyone in Europe, like from small companies to public institutions, they are really kind crazy trying to find options and so on because they just realize it's happening. And I have to say, in the US, they're kind of less fearful to try something else. It's a kind of a
Yes,
mentality
I
of
think
taking
so.
risks and so on. Yes, and that's why the US is now our biggest, market. And I like to say we are not, having the success because there's only French companies using it. So that's the opposite. That's probably one of our smallest markets.
Wow.
People are
Yeah.
using it because it works. So that's pretty much it, and that's enough to me.
I love the notion of it just works. I mean, I work for Veeam Software, and that's been
Yeah,
our mantra from the start. It just works, and it's a good thing to have. And I think the way that you've talked about it in terms of the problem that you were trying to solve with the orchestra, the fact that what you were trying to sort of split and make a new hypervisor when Citrix wasn't doing their pulling their weight, and you were trying to basically make the product better, it speaks volumes. And I think what you just talked about now the challenge on you guys and others in this market, because we will see the guys that are out there that have been somewhat established for the last 10 to 5 years
hmm,
in this space, but very much niche players. The market's all of a sudden going to open up and you're going to get bigger, but there's going to be competition again, right? So you have to be
yeah,
able to differentiate, you have to be nimble, you have to be able to innovate, because the problem with VMware having that monopoly was that they had that monopoly and people kind of got used to it and they got used to the features.
hmm.
And
Oh
so
yes.
I think that that's the biggest challenge for you guys going forward. But it's been a tremendous conversation. I really love the history. I love the name. I love where you came from. I love the fact that you started this by just coding, and working with not even really APIs back in the day, but just trying to make
Yeah.
something better out of it need. So, this has got a proper story of innovation and need. And I love the fact that you guys are doing it. So, it's been good to have you on the show. We could have talked for a lot
You're
longer.
welcome. Oh yes.
I'm really interested to see where Vates goes. I'm looking forward to the growth of the XCP-ng and the Xen Orchestrator and what you guys are doing in the space. So, just as a final reminder, if you love great things with great tech and would like to feature on future episodes, please click on the link on the show notes, head to gtwgt.com and register your interest. Thanks again to Vates. Thank you, Oliver, and we will
Thank you
see
very
you next
much.
time on Great Things
See
with
you.
Great Tech.